Hi, and welcome. My name is Dr. Rotimi Olania, and I'd like to welcome you to this module on the marketing mix and sports marketing. Now, this is part of a larger course, and that course in itself is the course in sponsorship, sports marketing, and brand property management under the aegis of experiential NG. Now, as I said, my name is Rotimi, and I will be your facilitator for this module. Now, just to briefly introduce myself before we get straight into it, I am currently a practicing academic, if you want to call it that, and researcher in the area of marketing with a business school here in the UK, but also a practicing consultant or practitioner, if you will, in the field of marketing services. I have, over the last 32 years or so, been very privileged to have worked in various areas and aspects of marketing, particularly brand management, sales, and activation and experiential marketing. And I'm hoping to bring that to bear in the conversation that we will have today. Now, the interesting thing about what we are about to do today is that we are going in to discuss something which perhaps might be the most traditional concept or the most famous concept that there is in the world of marketing, and that's this concept of the marketing mix. Now, the marketing mix sits, as I said, at the core of all tactical marketing considerations that we put in place when we want to execute campaigns or strategy. Indeed, it might be seen as a toolkit with which we execute marketing strategy. So, what we will be doing, therefore, in the course of this module is to focus on this conceptual argument or this conceptual framework. But we'll be looking at it through the prisms, if you will, or through the eyes of what it means to adapt it to sports marketing. Now, in itself, sports marketing is one of the few or rarely discussed aspects or specialist areas of marketing, but it is one which, without a doubt, is gaining ground and is extremely important as we manage the issues that we have to in terms of human entertainment, human expression, and the like. What I'm hoping is that at the end of this module, you'd have gained a better understanding of all the elements of the marketing mix. I'm hoping that you will learn how to use the marketing mix to develop appropriate campaigns for your sports brand. But above all, that as practitioners in wherever field you are, particularly in the field of sports, in the field of sponsorship, or even brand management and the like, that you're able to develop a deeper appreciation for the contemporary marketing mix and to understand how this in itself is used to drive strategic as well as tactical initiatives for the marketing of sports brands all over the world. Now, let us therefore start the conversation with, as you would expect, another definition of sports brands, of marketing. And I know that maybe across several modules, particularly within this course, you probably have already been introduced to a definition of what marketing is. Indeed, being practitioners, I am confident that you also have your own definitions of what it is to be in the field of marketing. But because this is a great place to start and to build us up, I would like to reference the 2012 piece written by Kotler and Keller, where they very practically give us a very practical definition, if you will, that marketing can be defined as all business activities that help us to introduce as well as gain the acceptance of new products or existing products, but ultimately that also helps to ease or enrich the lives of people. And I think that's what is important here, the last part about easing and enriching the lives of people. Now, in order to do this, what tends to happen is that we need to set goals and strategies, and these all have to be developed along a set of marketing components. These components are what might be referred to as the marketing mix. And so we're going to look at those in a little bit more detail. So, the marketing mix is a very old concept, 1960, developed by McCarthy. and ever since has actually been able to survive all sorts of critiques and criticisms, if you will. But I think what's interesting to note is that later on, I think it was in the 1980s, as we moved to the service dominant logic approach to marketing, 3 additional P's were added to the initial or original 4 P's. Now, these 4 P's are product, price, promotion, and place, in no particular order. Although it might be argued that it's best to start with product, because you start with the product before you start to establish the other elements. And later on, as I said, this mix was expanded to 7 with the introduction of 3 new service-orientated or dominant logic type elements of the marketing mix. And these are processes, people, and physical evidence. What we will now do is we're going to go across all 7, but not just to discuss them in the generic form. I think what we really are about is trying to see how we adapt each of those elements and try and understand what the sports context of each of those elements might be. So we start obviously with product. The interesting thing about product is that without a product, there is no marketing. And product here, by the way, also means service. So in other words, you can have a physical, tangible product, or you can have an intangible product, which is otherwise referred to as a service. But they fundamentally operate in the same way. Now, Mullins et al. In 2016 offered us the definition of what the product component of the mix is. They say that a product is anything that satisfies a need or a want. And it does that through consumption or acquisition. And these are very interesting words. And as practitioners in sports or entertainment, it's interesting if you step back and reflect on what that means. So in other words, what we're saying is that the product, your product, has to be something that is satisfying the need of or a want of a consumer, i.e. a fan. Again, reflecting on what Keller and Kotler say, it is something which actually has to enrich them or ease their pain. And indeed, you can see that sports is something which enriches, and that's why it's an excellent product or a service, depending on how you see it. And then it has to be consumed. The interesting thing about sports, as you can understand, is that it's consumed in a very different way than you will consume a physical product. So the consumption as a service, the consumption of excitement, the consumption of theater, the consumption of entertainment, that's an important concept for us to understand as we try to build out a marketing plan for a sporting brand. And it has to be acquired. And we'll talk about that. Whatever your sports brand is, indeed, it has to be acquired. And we see that the acquisition of sports now by fans or super fans, as we like to refer to them, come in different forms, particularly now that we've got digital marketing and the digital platforms being a very rapidly advancing element of commerce. A product could be anything. It includes physical artifacts like TVs, radios, cars, which were famous and which are quite popular. It includes services, and we've talked about that. It could be an educational service like this one, or medical, or indeed entertainment. It could indeed be a place. And cities today are massive place brands, and tourism marketing to a large extent is driven on that fundamental premise that this is a product that we're selling. You're selling the city of Lagos to investors, to people to come and live in, to other governments, to grant givers and takers. And so there is that organic form today within cities that ultimately means that they can satisfy needs and they can be acquired, because moving to a city means you're acquiring the right to live in it. Consumption means consuming either government services or all those that you might find within that space. And then, of course, there is that notion of an idea. Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement. There are lots of hashtags these days. The key thing is what's happening is people are also now using the elements of marketing to be able to drive and promote ideas. And of course, politicians are products which have to be sold to the consumers or the voting public, and all the acquisition of that or the consumption of that ultimately is through the vote. And we can see very clearly that over the last couple of years, there have been very interesting political brands and products out there, such as Barack Obama, for instance, who was very, very successful in using, a lot of very, very savvy, cutting-edge marketing ideas to push his candidacy through. Now, a product ultimately is layered. It's a multi-layered construction. Some will say it's a social construction, meaning it is constructed in the mind, but it is also constructed in the physical form. And for that reason, it is ultimately going to be layered by features and benefits. There are 5 key layers we must understand to a product, and we'll talk about the contextual implications of this within the world of sports later on. And now these 5 are at the core is the core benefit. The core product, if you will, or the core benefit that the product gives you. And we'll talk and define this later on. There is also the generic, which, as the name would or the title would imply, has to do with beyond the core, but also something which is ultimately shared by all. And we'll come to that. And then there is the expected. The expected level or the expected product, largely, again, we'll define that slightly in the next few minutes or so, largely is seen through the eyes ultimately of who will consume it. And then there is the augmented. The augmented is a very important part of a product, particularly the kinds of products that we will have in sports and entertainment. In fact, I will argue that a large chunk of what you see in a sporting brand and a sporting product ultimately is about the definition of what the augmented is, because that's what creates the passion. And then the potential product is the product in the future. Great products ultimately are not just products that serve or bundle sort of benefits, attributes, and features that serve current needs and wants, but ultimately have very clear pathway into how they might serve future needs and wants. And that's what makes a product sustainable. These are the 5 levels of a product. Some will leave it at 3, some leave it at 4, but this is largely the most, if you will, comprehensive prism through which you can look at products. And we're going to go into the benefit of each one of them now. So in the slide that is there, you see a table which has been hopefully exhaustively done to help you understand what the key considerations might be for products as regards sport. So the core benefit of a product is fundamentally that fundamental benefit that the customer buys into. In the case of sport, what happens is that a sports fan is looking for something. He's looking for excitement, he's looking for entertainment, he might be looking for relaxation, all depending on the type of dynamic or the ethos of that particular sport. However, what's being offered is my money for some time, where I'm able to be transported into a world which is not my usual or normal world. It is an escape from my day-to-day reality, and that's an important aspect of what, therefore, the way in which we design a sporting product must be. It is not the usual day-to-day. It is something which takes and transports whoever that person is, indeed that fan, to another world through the way in which we orchestrate entertainment, excitement, and relaxation. That's the core. Now, the basic product, as we move on to, is actually to do with the sets and the features and the benefits, the specific features, benefits that product owner designs into the product, and so that it can be defined or seen to meet the realities and the requirements of the core benefit. So in sports, you want excitement, you want some entertainment, you want relaxation, you want pumping adrenaline or whatever it is. And so a sporting brand must offer that. And that's the reason why they've got different types of sporting brands. A sporting brand that's targeted at the intellect, such as chess, or, by the way, to a certain degree golf, you might say, is different from maybe a sporting brand that is ultimately directed at your pumping adrenaline, such as ice hockey, for instance, which is, or squash, or tennis for that matter. Strategy games are different, or sports are different from, as you can see, other types of passion sports, which might have to do with other types of combative sports, or indeed this entire new world of esports, which is driven by a whole new set of agenda and a whole new set of benefits and structures. and benefit structures and attributes, which differentiate the younger generation, if you will, from the older one. So, our bringing those things to life, in other words, setting up a stadium or a venue or a race course or a golf course, actually putting in place the games, the infrastructure, putting in place staff and helpers who ultimately make this happen. That is the manifestation of the core benefit in its physical format. And that's therefore what the basic product is, the way we're able to bring all the necessary elements together so that we can serve the core benefit to the consumer. Now, the expected product really has to do with what the potential customer expects. And that's what they expect to see. They want to see clean or interesting looking or exciting looking stadia. They want to see a race course which is put on tartan tracks or whatever. They want their specific expectations, which ultimately gives them a sense of the way in which the attribute must look. And so within the context of sports, as I can see, as we've said, these are the kinds of elements that ultimately have to be put in place. But there are also things like streaming platforms. If we're looking at things today in the modern way, esports, for instance, is about streaming platforms and certain other types of elements which you put in place, multi-camera angles, and so on and so forth. Now, I said earlier, if you remember, that the augmented product is to a large extent a very important part of sporting brands or sporting products. What is the augmented? The augmented is the extra. It is that which delivers functional, but also more importantly, emotional value beyond what the core and the expected offer you. So yes, you're going to a football stadium to watch, 22 players play with a linesman on two sides and a referee on in the middle, because they are also part of the entertainment. However, that's the functional. But the moment we say you're going to Nou Camp or you're going to a stadium which has a brand name that we all know, Onikon Stadium, if it's in Lagos, or in the National or Teslim Balogun, or indeed if you're talking about more famous stadia, sort of Maracana in Brazil and so on and so forth. What happens is now it's come now beyond just the fact that they're stadia or a stadium and players. There are now things that manifest beyond, and things like logos, colors, brands, the music, the type of commentators, the way in which camera angles are expected. That's the reason why, to a large extent, the Premier League is a very successful league. Beyond the fact that it's got excellent players and entertainers within the stadia, there's so much also that has been built into the augmented product, which is why it's offering what it offers you today. The same with the NBA, with the basketball leagues. Then the potential product. The potential product is the promise that the product offers the consumer of future values, future benefits that can be added to it. Indeed, every successful product has to have the potential product element of it. That's what makes it sustainable into the long term. So in sport, we start off perhaps with the basic, the fundamental, but the sporting fan needs to see where this is going. The sporting fan needs to see the possibility of growth, of additional content, for instance, in football, or elements that can be built on top of it that offer them even further excitement, further opportunities to be able to express themselves, to express their loyalty to a tribe, which is an important part of belonging, of watching sport, is that element of being able to relate or ultimately to become a member of a subgroup within that sport. So that's the potential product. Now we move on to the next, or the second P, and this is traditionally seen as promotion. Promotion basically is one of the most visible elements of the product. Indeed, marketing campaigns have to rely on effective promotions and communication so that they can reach their goals. And these goals are not limited. They include but are not limited to being able to deliver information about the product, but I think the most important thing about promotion is persuasion. Promotion is about communicating and persuading target audiences as to the benefit that is to be had if they truly take on board or the product. In other words, if they consume it, if they buy it, if they vote for it, that there is a benefit to be had. It is also about encouraging the consumer to not just stand by the sidelines, but to take action. And that taking of action ultimately is one of the most important elements of the promotional mix, particularly when we look at it from what is referred to as the hierarchy of effects model. So there are different types of promotional elements, which might also be referred to as the promotions mix. It's also sometimes referred to as the integrated marketing communications mix. And you can see on the slide that you have there that it covers a range of different disciplines, such as advertising, which is basically paid for, communication and persuasion, sales promotion, which is about the use of live elements, as well as using other forms of and techniques to ultimately promote the product rather than just make people aware of it. Public relations, which is about reputations management through the use of media relation platforms. Social media, which is website and online search, as well as mobile media, which are today definitely the fastest growing platforms on account of the digital nature that the world now basically lives in. Social media is the use of social elements or social media elements such as, things like Facebook, Instagram, which are social media platforms. They might also include, by the way, things like the newer evolving platforms like TikTok or Snapchat, which was a bit popular some time back. Website and online search, it has two fundamental approaches. You can either do the traditional SEO, which is referred to as search engine optimization, which is using different techniques, particularly built around keyword research and keywords, to allow platforms like Google or Bing or some other search engines like that to be able to actually help you be found by consumers who are looking for information. That's Google, and that's the SEO, the search engine optimization. Or you've got the other one, which might be things like pay-per-click, which is a bit more paid, which is not as organic as SEO, but is actually using new paid for, if you will, platforms again. But the interesting thing about that is you're not paying all at once. You pay or become liable to pay, if you will, when people do click on your particular link. And then you got websites and mobile websites and different types of sites that you can ultimately build. And that's this notion of having a website, which clearly every serious brand or product today has to have. And the mobile marketing is the use of the mobile phone. And this is extremely important and has grown tremendously in recent times. And then, of course, direct marketing, personal selling. These are traditional formats that have been used over the past couple of years. And they all have some way or the other, a lot of bearing in the way in which sports marketing or sports products can be marketed. The key thing, therefore, to kind of understand about why we do promotions and why promotions are effective is because there are kind of 7 key objectives that they help us to manage along the customer journey. In other words, the promotional mix helps us to intersect or interface with the consumer, a customer, along their journey to find us, to kind of get a bit more information about us until they ultimately buy us or join us. And so there you can see that there are quite a lot of, as I said, 7 different things or key objectives that can be looked at. So there is obviously, it normally starts with awareness and instant recognition, which is called salience. There's the fact that we ultimately are using promotional elements to convey detailed information. So you might refer to that as education to a certain degree. There is all very importantly the projection of imagery and personality. And this is absolutely crucial when you're looking at sporting brands. That whole notion of what we stand for, that projection of who we are, and that whole sense of what it means to belong to our tribe. Promotions are also used to build trust, but above all, I guess they can also be used to elicit the kinds of emotions that you want from your target audience, inspiring action, and then ultimately making sure that there is a network of community or connecting people. And so we use promotion to a very, very large degree within the context of sports and sports marketing. And here we have just a bit of a mood board to show the different ways in which this promotional campaigns occur in sports. And so over there you've got social media hypes, in this case where the Zlatan social media hype was run very successfully in Europe. I think it was PSG, Paris Saint-Germain some years back. You can use sales promotion on the websites to reduce pricings of merchandising, which is a crucial element of having a sporting brand. The whole management of relationship between the brand or the product as a corporate entity, particularly the club. If you've got a sporting club which is reputable, you want to manage the reputation of the club across different platforms. So public relations is an important tool. Mobile, because that's where the world lives today, particularly the millennials as we move forward. So a lot of things which we do in the sports marketing arena needs to ultimately be manifest in terms of a mobile marketing platform or infrastructure. You've got your traditional venue branding, like hoardings and boards and billboards. You've got your traditional press ads. And then, of course, as I said, a lot of brands today need to understand that their web presence, their digital marketing presence is highly dependent on the way and the manner in which they're able to build out their digital infrastructure, their digital marketing infrastructure, starting obviously with a website that makes sense, a website that truly reflects the brand, the product, but more importantly, that projects all the necessary variables that we've talked about, that therefore allows an audience to find them, to engage with them successfully, and ultimately to relate with them over time. Now, so you've got that by way of ideas. Now, one of the things which I'd like to do, if we're able to do that here, is to play, and you will have this in the resource anyway, the Nike campaign for calling Kaepernick, who I hope we all are familiar with, was I think it was the American football player who basically took a knee in protestation to racism in the United States, and sadly lost his job or his role because of what he did, but who over the years has become such a very powerful sporting voice, so much so that he's been supported and actually promoted alongside by Nike. Now, it gives you in many ways a very useful and powerful example as to the place of sport in human existence. The fact that we play sport not just for what we do on the field, but also, in fact, to a large extent, what we might do off the field. That sports is not just this transactional element. Sports is a way of life. It's a philosophy. Sports is a point of view, and therefore a brand or a product is not a sporting product is not just the entertainment element of it, but indeed could also be the idea behind it.
Nike is one of the most recognized and reputable brands in the world. So it's no wonder the world reacted when the brand released a controversial ad featuring NFL free agent Colin Kaepernick.
So don't ask if your dreams are crazy. Ask if they're crazy enough.
But it's not the first time Nike waded into controversial territory with its ads. Here's how Nike learned from its past to turn an emotional national conversation into dollars. Kaepernick is known for sparking a movement within the NFL after he took a knee during the national anthem at a 2016 game to protest oppression and police brutality in America.
I'll continue to sit. I'm going to continue to stand with the people that are being oppressed.
And of course, President Trump weighed in.
To say, get that son of a off the field right now, out, he's fired. Fired!
At one point in 2017, more than 200 NFL players knelt, sat, or raised their fists during the anthem. Kaepernick opted out of his contract with the San Francisco 49ers in 2017, but since becoming a free agent, Kaepernick has not been signed by another team. He claims that the NFL owners colluded against him to ruin his career. He's been since working as an activist, reportedly donating over $1 million to charity. The internet went into an uproar when Kaepernick posted a Nike ad on Twitter with the words, "Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything." People who were strongly against Kaepernick announced their intentions to boycott the brand on social media. By the next day, shares of Nike stock dropped roughly 3.2%. President Trump tweeted his dismay for the marketing campaign, stating, "Nike is getting absolutely killed with anger and boycotts." And later, what was Nike thinking? While it seemed like Nike's campaign could have destroyed its brand, it ended up working in its favor, at least in the short run. In the days after the ad launched, the company's online sales jumped more than 25% before coming back down to earth. That's because advocates of Kaepernick and Nike's message banded together to buy more Nike gear. Supporters like Nick Cannon use their money and platform to purchase Nike gear and give it to the homeless. This isn't the first time Nike made a social statement in an ad. The brand has historically taken a stand on issues, and it's almost always resulted in a rise in sales. In July 1988, it released its first Just Do It campaign when it addressed ageism featuring octogenarian Walter Scott. The campaign completely transformed Nike's revenue, increasing from $877 million in fiscal year 1987 to $1.2 billion in 1988. Profits almost tripled from the year before, and then were up another 139% by 1990. In 1993, the company aired a commercial starring Charles Barkley.
I am not a role model. I'm not paid to be a role model.
This sparked controversy about whether celebrities should be held at a higher standard, and contrasted with the squeaky clean image of Nike's biggest star, Michael Jordan. That fiscal year, revenue increased by 15.4%. In August 1995, Nike released its If You Let Me Play ad, which supported women in sports and brought up the issue of gender equality.
You let me play sports.
I will be more likely to leave a man who beats me.
Earlier that year in February, Nike featured openly gay, HIV-positive runner Rick Munoz in its Just Do It campaign. International sales rose 36% in fiscal year 1996. Of course, commercials aren't the only thing to drive sales, but they help cement the Nike brand at the center of sports and society. In December 2007, Nike touched on disabilities.
I'd love to really, but I can't. I just can't.
Featuring Paralympic medalist Matt Scott of the U.S. Men's Wheelchair Basketball Association. Revenue grew 14% in fiscal 2008 year to $18.6 billion. Revenue dipped slightly in 2010, but 2012 brought another surge when Nike again touched on gender equality with its Voices campaign.
People aren't used to women being so passionate. It scares them.
Revenue rose by $3.2 billion in 2012 over the previous year. Since then, revenue has been on a consistent upward climb, while the company continues to raise social awareness with ads like What Will They Say About You, Find Your Greatness, and Equality. It's also important to note that Nike was under heat for various controversial ads that had little to do with social justice. In April 2010, the brand released a commercial featuring Tiger Woods with the voiceover of his late father. This was amid reports of his extramarital affairs. The company also continued to stand by Kobe Bryant in this 2006 campaign through his sexual assault case and settlement. The criminal charges were ultimately dropped. This is not to say Nike doesn't cut ties with anyone. The sports brand dropped its endorsement deal with boxer Manny Pacquiao after making homophobic comments. Baltimore Ravens Ray Rice, Adrian Peterson, and Lance Armstrong also famously lost their deals. So what was Nike thinking? While most big brands try to avoid controversy and huge risk, Nike embraces it. Despite the negative feedback these ads may receive, Nike might not be sacrificing much.
Right. So, I mean, that's, in my view, a very interesting video that kind of gives us a sense of the power of communicating products, and particularly within the realms of sport. But let's now move on to look at place, which is the third of the 4 Ps within the traditional marketing mix. And this is normally and often referred to as distribution. Distribution is that component which ultimately has to consider how it is that we're going to get our product or our service to the end consumer. And within the context of sport, this is really about this notion of how we are able to create the convenience of purchase and how we're able to establish the system by which ultimately our consumer can ultimately see us. And depending on the nature of the sport, depending on the type of sport, obviously there are lots of things that need to be considered. Now, one of the key things that obviously we need to consider today in the modern age is the fact that the way in which sports is now consumed has gone beyond physical consumption. Sports is now consumed largely very digitally. And so it's important that products or brands or sporting products, particularly now, no matter what type of product they are or sports they are, need to consider the digital channels through which and by which they ultimately get themselves distributed to the ultimate consumer, which is the fan. So there are a lot of things that you therefore would need to consider in terms of a distribution strategy or a place strategy. And it's all about choices, because strategies are really about choices. Am I therefore going to think about an intensive distribution, or is it going to be a selective distribution, or will it be exclusive, which is typically for higher end type of products? So the high end sports, golf, fencing and things like that tend to have more very exclusive channel distribution, whereas the popular sports, as they're called, have more intensive, while the mid-range sports might have a bit more of a selective type of distribution. It's all about how much of the desired market am I hoping to cover. Now, most sporting clubs will obviously start their journey being community-based ventures. They're typically famous within their local towns, their local regions, but over time and the years, at least this is particularly true for football brands out of Europe. Over the years, what happens is that they continue to win through the feats of accomplishment. They become more famous, they become nationally renowned, and then internationally renowned. And that journey that they make on the arc of recognition and reputation fundamentally also, to a large extent, needs to be what is looked at and needs to be foiled by the club's distribution agenda.